Grandma, help me.
The faint voice on the phone was my grandson, who had just turned 5. He was hot and struggling to breathe, unable to get out of the car, and sent an SOS. I hurriedly found the car, broke the window with a nearby rock, and opened the door. Inside the scorching car, which must have been over 104 degrees Fahrenheit, he was limp. Not seeing my daughter, I opened the trunk, fearing the worst, and found her lifeless body. What has he done? I can't forgive him. I vowed to take revenge on my son-in-law. I am a 60-year-old housewife living in a small, nature-rich rural town. There are mountains here that have been passed down through generations, and I spend my time occasionally patrolling and managing it. Since my husband passed away 5 years ago, I have been living alone, but my daughter Andrea lives nearby, so I don't feel too lonely. She often brought my grandson Liam, who had just turned 5, to visit, which I enjoyed.
Grandma, I want to go for a walk in the mountains today.
Liam loves nature, probably influenced by my son-in-law Noah. My daughter used to run around the fields and mountains when she was little, but she became more of an indoor person over time. So, I was surprised when she told me she was marrying Noah, who loves camping. When they got married, Noah was excited to learn that I managed the mountains and asked if he could use it for camping. I agreed, thinking it would be fine for family use. He seemed to enjoy going to the mountains with Andrea and sometimes camping alone. After Liam was born, he often went out alone. One day, I noticed an unfamiliar car frequently entering and leaving the mountain. Feeling uneasy, I drove deeper into the mountain and saw barbecue coals, picnic sheets, and scattered trash. The place, usually filled with clear air and tranquility, was now in disarray, making me anxious. The only person allowed to enter the mountain is Noah. Could it be him? I couldn't stand the thought and immediately took out my cell phone. Noah, I have something to ask you. Have you used my mountain for camping recently? There are coals and picnic sheets left behind.
No, it wasn't me. Stop accusing me,
he said curtly before hanging up. His cold response made me even more suspicious, but without evidence, I couldn't say anything more. The following weekend, I went to check the mountain again. Once more, it was in the same disarray as before. I couldn't help but think that my son-in-law might be involved. Anger welled up inside me, and this time I called my daughter. Do you know if Noah was camping on my mountain last weekend? I didn't get any notice.
Yes. I think he said he was going.
Andrea's response was hesitant, and she didn't sound very energetic. The camping gear and trash were left behind. If he doesn't clean up properly, I can't let him use the place anymore. Can you tell him that?
I'm sorry, okay.
Is something wrong? You don't sound like yourself.
Yes, just a bit.
Her unusually heavy tone and different demeanor made me worry even more. You can tell me anything. What's going on?
Thanks. But it's okay. It's not clear yet. I'll talk to you later.
With that, Andrea hung up before I could respond. Is she troubled by something? But I can't force her to talk. I spent the following days feeling uneasy, unable to get my daughter or the trash on the mountain out of my mind. That day, despite summer nearing its end, the lingering heat was intense, and the temperature kept rising since morning. As I was taking a break after returning from shopping, my cell phone rang, and I saw it was from my daughter. "Hello? Andrea?"
Grandma, help me. It's so hot.
It wasn't my daughter, but my grandson's faint voice that I heard when I answered the phone. "Liam. What's wrong? Where's your mom?" His voice was broken and I could hear his heavy breathing. It was clear that something was seriously wrong.
Dad said we were going camping. We got in the car. But I fell asleep. And when I woke up, Mom was gone. I can't move.
Hearing my grandson's crying voice, my mind went blank. I couldn't imagine what was happening. "It's okay. Grandma will come to help you right away. Do you know where you are?"
I think it's Grandma's mountain.
There were several places on the mountain I managed where my son-in-law had camped before. I wasn't sure exactly where, but if he was in the car, he might be suffering from heat stroke. "Wait for me, I'm coming right away." After hanging up the phone, I quickly grabbed a cooler from the storage room, filled it with all the ice packs I had in the fridge, and threw in a few sports drinks. Then, I immediately called 911 to explain the situation before jumping into my car. I have to save him. The sound of the engine and my heartbeat echoed in my ears as I gripped the steering wheel tightly, making a strong vow in my heart. As I drove, I was filled with anxiety and worry. Because of that, the familiar mountain path looked different than usual. I'll have to check each potential spot one by one. At the first and second locations, there was no sign of anyone, just the clear air and the rustling of the trees. Feeling the sweat running down my back, I headed to the third open area. At that moment, I spotted a car in the distance. That's Noah's car. I quickly got out of my car and ran over to look inside. There, in the child's seat, was my limp grandson. "Liam." The doors were locked, and despite banging on the window and calling his name repeatedly, there was no response. I couldn't imagine how long he had been in there. The thought alone was terrifying. I looked around and grabbed a nearby rock, smashing it against the driver's side window with all my strength. The glass shattered, and the intense heat from inside the car rushed out. Reaching through the window, I unlocked the door, and the scorching air enveloped me. The temperature inside the car must have been well over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. In such heat, my grandson was tied up in the child's seat with plastic cords. "Liam. Liam. Stay with me." Desperately, I untied the cords and lifted him out of the seat. His body was unbelievably hot. I quickly took him outside and cooled him down with ice packs, then rushed back to my son-in-law's car. "Andrea." I looked around but saw no one. Fearing the worst, I opened the trunk. I couldn't help but gasp. There, bound hand and foot, was my daughter in a terrible state. I managed to get her into the car, carrying her on my back, and hurried down the mountain road. As I reached the paved road at the foot of the mountain, I saw the red lights of an ambulance. My grandson and daughter were immediately taken to the hospital. I immediately called my son-in-law, but no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't reach him. I went to my daughter's house and rang the intercom, but there was no sign of anyone, and it seemed like no one was home. Why do they have to go through this? Tears started to fall as I thought. They became a family to be happy, didn't they? I swore to make him take responsibility for this and began preparing for my revenge. The next morning, I drove back to the mountain. When I saw fresh tire tracks on the ground, I quietly got out of the car. I took something out of the passenger seat, gripped it tightly to calm my breathing, and slowly walked to a slightly open area ahead. After walking a bit, I heard music playing and cheerful laughter. I stopped and hid in the grass to observe. There was my son-in-law, surrounded by a few men and women who seemed to be his friends. They were happily unloading camping gear from the car.
Isn't it great that we can use such a nice place for free? You should thank me.
Yes, thank you, Lord Noah.
They replied jokingly. How can you be having so much fun after leaving Andrea and Liam in such a state? I suppressed the urge to jump out and continued watching. My son-in-law and a young woman were unusually close, with their arms around each other. They were always together, talking and laughing with their faces close. Maybe this is why my daughter hasn't been herself lately. And Noah laughed loudly, looking at his friends' faces one by one.
I'm really glad you guys are here to enjoy camping with me. Andrea would have been bored if she came along, and she would have just been a nuisance.
The moment I heard those words, my blood boiled.
All I need is this mountain to enjoy myself freely.
I had reached my limit. Noah had been using the mountain, which had been passed down through generations, without any gratitude, leaving it a mess, and had been treating my daughter and grandson terribly. Shaking with anger, I stepped out from behind the grass and appeared in front of my son-in-law. I heard everything you just said. Noah turned around with a surprised look and muttered,
Why are you here?
His friends, who had stopped setting up the tent, looked at me curiously and asked, Who is she? Ignoring their gazes, I glared at my son-in-law. How dare you lock my daughter and grandson in the car? What were you thinking? Noah hesitated for a moment but quickly regained his composure and glanced at his friends. Then he feigned ignorance, saying, What are you talking about?
Don't say things that give people the wrong idea. I invited Andrea and Liam, but after we got to the mountain, they said they wanted to go back. So, I just lent them the car.
At that moment, I felt my entire body boil with rage. His blatant lies made my emotions surge uncontrollably. That day, my daughter was tied up and thrown into the trunk of the car, and my grandson was strapped into the child seat. They were suffering from heatstroke in a car that was over 104 degrees Fahrenheit and had to be taken to the hospital.
Huh? I don't know anything about that.
He immediately retorted, but his friends started to murmur after hearing my words. They are both hospitalized now, but fortunately, their lives are not in danger. When I told him that Andrea and Liam were safe, his face twisted. It is an undeniable fact that my daughter and grandson were in real danger that day, and if they had been found any later, who knows what could have happened. Noah. I heard you are having an affair, aren't you? I glanced at the woman standing next to my son-in-law. According to Andrea, who regained consciousness. Noah had been taking advantage of her inability to go out freely since Liam was born, neglecting childcare, and going camping with his friends almost every week. He also started coming home late on weekdays, claiming he had to work overtime. Suspecting Noah of infidelity, Andrea secretly checked his phone and social media and found out that one of the women in the camping group was his lover. In the midst of this, Noah suddenly suggested, "Let's go camping as a family," which made Andrea suspicious. And then, after drinking the beverage you gave them, both Andrea and Liam started to feel drowsy. What do you have to say about that?
I told you. I don't know anything about it.
As I pressed him, he started to back away, looking flustered. But Andrea noticed something was wrong and did something about it.
What are you talking about?
Andrea, realizing something was off, quickly hid her cell phone under the child's seat before losing consciousness. When my grandson woke up, scared and struggling, the cords loosened a bit. As he tried to free himself, he found Andrea's phone under the seat and used it to call me for help. Liam had often played with Andrea's phone, calling me and saying, "I want to talk to Grandma." So, he knew how to use it.
She kept nagging me about helping with the kids and accusing me of cheating. She even told me to stop going camping. I couldn't take it anymore.
Noah spat out these words with an angry expression. I couldn't forgive him for putting my daughter and grandson through such a terrible ordeal for his selfish reasons. I don't want you on this mountain anymore. Leave right now.
What? Don't you dare order me around.
He turned red with anger and raised the camping knife he was holding, rushing towards me. His friends screamed in fear. I quickly sprayed him with the bear repellent I had in my hand. This is a spray I carry when watching over the mountain, just in case. It contains chili pepper extract, which is very irritating to the eyes and throat. Of course, it's not meant to be used on people, but I felt my life was in danger and had no choice but to use it. I have this, so I'll be fine. I told myself to muster up the courage and confronted him.
Ah!
Noah screamed and turned his face away. Although he was about 9 feet away and didn't get a direct hit, the spray was strong enough to make him cover his face. Unable to open his eyes, he staggered backward, groaning. At that moment, someone shouted, "Watch out behind you!"
Ah!
Noah lost his balance and tumbled down the 30-foot slope. When I hurriedly looked down, he was crying and reaching out to me.
Someone, help me, please.
He kept pleading for help, but none of his friends moved. They whispered among themselves, "Did he just pull a knife on her, and isn't this Noah's land?" They seemed completely put off by his actions. His friends quickly packed up their camping gear into the car and left, saying, "We're sorry," as they hurried away. "You will pay for your crimes," I declared, looking at Noah lying on the slope.
Ugh, they were saved, right? So it's fine now, just help me already.
His selfish words pushed my anger beyond its limits. What are you talking about? Their lives were in danger. I'll call the police for you. Until they arrive, you can cool your head there. With a sigh, I left the scene. As I got into my car, Noah's pitiful cries for help echoed through the quiet mountain. A week later, the police contacted me, saying they had found a man matching the description I had reported. It was Noah, who had been found emaciated and in tatters after being rescued by the police. He had tried to escape from the spot where he fell, fearing arrest. Without a compass, he had wandered off the path and nearly got lost in the mountains. I told the police about what he had done to my daughter and grandson and his unauthorized use of the mountain. As a result, Noah was arrested. The incident made a small headline in the local newspaper. My daughter and grandson recovered and were discharged from the hospital. Of course, she divorced him and demanded $100,000 in alimony, medical expenses, and child support. They have now moved in with me, and the three of us are living together. I decided to sell the mountain I had been managing. Partly due to my age, but also because I didn't want to tie my daughter to this place. My grandson was sad that he wouldn't be able to go to the mountain he loved, but he smiled and said,
"But it's okay because I can be with Grandma."
His smile and words warmed my heart like sunlight filtering through the trees.
How did you like this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.
Grandma said she's coming back for revenge.
During the funeral of my mother, who had passed away from illness, my 5-year-old daughter suddenly said this.
Hey, come on. Stop joking around.
For some reason, my husband's expression tensed for a brief moment before he forced a nervous smile. In fact, my daughter possessed a mysterious ability to hear the voices of the deceased. And when she conveyed a message from my mother through her, my husband was terrified. The next day, he took his own life. What on earth is happening? In truth, a shocking fact was hidden behind this incident. My name is Carla. I married my husband Jay, who is 5 years older than me, when I was 33. I switched from being a full-time employee at a pharmaceutical company to working part-time, focusing more on my family. 2 years later, our daughter Diana was born.
Carla, from now on, let's build a happy home with the three of us.
My husband adored Diana and eagerly participated in raising her. He cherished me as well, and we enjoyed peaceful and fulfilling days together. My parents' house was about a 10-minute drive from ours, and I often took Diana there to play. Since Jay's work kept him busy, and it wasn't uncommon for him to come home late at night, having my parents nearby was a great comfort to me. Diana loved my father and mother dearly.
I want to stay over at Grandpa and Grandma's house.
She would say it so often it became like a catchphrase, and she would cry at the end of each visit, saying, "I want to stay here longer." Both of my parents were retired, but thanks to income from real estate, they seemed to be financially comfortable.
I bought this because I thought it would suit Diana.
One time, it was children's clothing from a brand that was usually out of reach.
You know, this toy is really popular now. But I also heard this one is great, so I bought both.
Another time, she brought educational toys designed to develop a child's intellect. They spoiled Diana by buying anything they heard was good, without worrying about the cost. Come on, Dad, Mom. Even with all of these, she won't be able to play with everything.
But I just thought it would make Diana happy.
My parents visibly deflated when I scolded them, and my husband and I couldn't help but chuckle. How about setting some rules? Big presents will only be for birthdays and Christmas.
What? But that's only twice a year.
Oh, Mom. I was a bit exasperated by her relentless desire to make Diana happy, but I could understand her feelings. Still, I wanted Diana to develop a proper sense of money, so I asked them to keep things within reasonable limits. Thankfully, they agreed. With my parents watching over her, Diana grew up happily and healthily. But those peaceful days did not last long. When Diana was 4 years old, my father suddenly passed away. Since my parents had been a loving couple, my mother was deeply depressed even during the funeral.
Grandpa says he's watching over you.
My daughter gently offered a tissue to my crying mother. I thought she was trying to comfort her despite her young age, and I felt a surge of emotion welling up inside me.
He says he's excited to talk about golf with his friend Tony in heaven.
What? As Diana continued speaking, I was stunned by what she said. Tony was my father's best friend and golf buddy. He had been close to our family, and I had many memories with him, but he had passed away years before Diana was born. We had never told Diana about him, and there was no way she could have known. After Tony's death, my father had been devastated and stopped playing golf. It was such a sensitive topic that we had avoided discussing it altogether. Yet Diana continued to share secret stories, things only my father and I knew. Could it be that she can see my father and talk with him?
That might be the case.
At that moment, my mother and I realized that Diana had a mysterious ability. However, my husband didn't believe it at all. Instead, he dismissed it as creepy. Even so, the thought that my father was watching over us warmed our hearts. However, after that, my mother became somewhat withdrawn. Perhaps she had grown a bit nervous after suddenly being left alone. So, I visited her whenever I could find the time to check on how she was doing. Jay was also concerned about her and would stop by my parents' house on his way home from work.
I'm really grateful that he cares so much.
I was deeply thankful for my husband's kindness. Around a year after my father passed away, my mother started falling ill more frequently. I thought it might be due to her age, but I was worried, so I suggested she get checked at the hospital. I booked an appointment for a day I could take off from work, but before that day came, my mother passed away. If only I had taken her to the hospital sooner. Overwhelmed with regret, I was so shocked that I couldn't bring myself to do anything. Seeing me like that, Jay efficiently took care of all the preparations, and before I knew it, the day of the funeral had arrived. The ceremony proceeded quietly amid our grief, but suddenly, my daughter fixed a sharp gaze on my husband.
Grandma says she's coming back for revenge.
Diana. I had never seen that expression on her face before. When I glanced at Jay, he was staring blankly at Diana. But when he noticed my gaze, he quickly snapped out of it and gave a nervous smile.
Hey, come on, what are you saying? Stop joking around.
Though he said that, I wondered if Diana was once again exhibiting her strange ability. What is Mom trying to tell me? I'll ask Diana about it later. With that thought in mind, I gently put my arm around Diana's shoulders to comfort her. Then, Diana said something that made my heart skip a beat.
I will never forgive him. The victim ends with me.
Her words were so unlike anything a 5-year-old would say that it almost felt as if my mother was standing right behind her. Suddenly, Jay, sitting beside me, started trembling violently. Jay, are you okay?
Yeah.
I couldn't understand what was happening. Diana's words and Jay's behavior didn't connect, leaving me completely at a loss. The next day, after the funeral had somehow ended, while I was tidying up at my parents' house, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, it was the police. They told me Jay's car had been found parked at the harbor, and inside were his personal belongings, including his driver's license and what seemed to be a suicide note. They said they would continue the search, but it was likely that he had taken his own life. After the funeral, Jay had said, "I've got urgent work, so I might have to pull an all-nighter," and left the house. This can't be. I felt the blood drain from my body, and I collapsed to my knees. Losing two loved ones in such quick succession left me in shock, unable to think. I don't know how much time passed. The surroundings were bathed in the red glow of the setting sun, and Diana, waking from her nap, called out, "Mom?" Her voice snapped me back to reality, and I resumed cleaning while thinking about Jay. There's no way he had a reason to take his own life. Then I recalled what Diana had said during the funeral and wondered if my mother really had come back for revenge. A thought too far-fetched to be real, yet it crossed my mind. But there's no way Jay did something to make Mom hold a grudge, right? Confused and unsure of what to do, I decided to search through my mother's belongings for any clues. However, I found nothing, and despair began to take hold of me. "Diana, Mommy doesn't understand anymore." I muttered those words to my daughter, almost to myself. Suddenly, Diana stood up.
Grandma says to come here.
She grabbed my hand and led me out to the garden.
She says to dig here.
What? What do you mean?
Hurry.
Diana urged. Though bewildered, I followed her instructions and started digging. Soon, something emerged from the soil. This is. I picked it up, paralyzed by shock.
Mommy, and then.
Diana began to say something that was beyond belief. No way. That can't be true. I couldn't have imagined that something like this had been happening without my knowledge. Anger surged within me, bubbling up like magma. Determined to uncover the full truth, I decided to take action. 1 week later, I left Diana with a neighbor friend and stood alone in front of an apartment building. After waiting for a while, I saw a figure about to enter the apartment. Excuse me? The person stopped abruptly and turned to look at me, visibly startled.
Yes. Oh, Carla?
You're alive, Jay. Yes, it was my husband, who was supposed to have taken his own life. He stood frozen for a moment, then suddenly regained his composure.
No, you've got the wrong person.
Though he said that, his eyes darted around nervously. Stop pretending. What are you trying to do? Everyone's in an uproar over you.
Well, my memory's a bit fuzzy. Haha, what a mess.
I stared straight at him, and now he feigned amnesia. I ignored him, exasperated. Diana's strange ability told me you were alive. This was what Diana had meant by the unbelievable thing she said. After telling me that he was alive, she pointed to a spot on the map and confidently declared, "It seems he's here." Although I believed in Diana's ability, with everything happening so quickly, I felt confused and uncertain. Still, I had to know the truth, so I went to the location she indicated. And sure enough, I spotted Jay entering the apartment at that very spot. I was overwhelmed with the urge to confront him right then and there, but I realized I shouldn't act impulsively. I decided to prepare thoroughly and held off approaching him. "Why did you do this?" Jay lowered his head and let out a deep sigh.
I hated everything. I just wanted to start a new life.
Though Jay mumbled in a voice barely above a whisper, there was likely some truth in his words. He had a reason to fake his death and disappear from the world. "You were really trying to escape from my mom's revenge, weren't you?"
That's ridiculous.
"You never believed in Diana's abilities, so why are you so scared of my dead mother?"
I'm not scared. Besides, I didn't do anything to make her hate me.
Jay snapped back, but it was clear from his agitated demeanor that he was desperate. "I think my mom didn't die from an illness. You killed her."
That's impossible.
His denial was unconvincing, and sweat began to bead on his forehead. I pulled something from my bag and thrust it toward Jay. "Weren't you giving these to my mom? Telling her they were supplements or something?" It was a small transparent bag containing capsules. I had unearthed it from the garden of my family home, just as Diana had told me, hidden inside a tin box.
I have no idea what that is.
This is a dangerous drug, even for healthy people, if taken continuously. I pulled out a sheet filled with unfamiliar words and numbers. "Do you remember that I used to work at a pharmaceutical company?" I asked my colleagues in the lab to analyze the capsules I found. "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?"
Even if that's true, there's no proof I gave them to her.
"Then can you explain what this says?" I handed him a notebook. It was my mother's diary, which had also been in the tin. Flipping through the pages, I pointed to one entry. Jay's eyes scanned the words, and he let out a ridiculous yelp.
What?
Written in my mother's neat handwriting was, "Jay brought me vitamins after work." Such a kind son-in-law. "So you told her to take these pills, didn't you?" This entry explained why Jay had often visited my family home after my father passed away. The diary even noted, he said he wanted to see me looking healthy, so he came to visit. But his real motive was to ensure she was taking the drugs. As I cornered him further, Jay clenched his teeth. But it seems her health declined after she started taking those pills.
Isn't that just due to her age?
No, she realized something was wrong, so she pretended to take them and secretly hid the pills. She had recorded everything meticulously in her diary, including which parts of her body felt unwell.
If she was so suspicious, why didn't she tell you?
She had a reason she couldn't.
What do you mean?
You threatened her. You said if she told anyone, Diana and I would be in danger, didn't you? I showed him the diary entry that described exactly that. Jay's eyes widened, realizing that he hadn't expected my mother to document his threats. According to her, she had confronted him one day, asking what the pills were. And when she told him that she suspected the supplements were the cause of her health issues, Jay seemed furious. He even threatened her, using me as a shield, and silenced her.
Just because it's written doesn't mean it's true. She could have been imagining things. She wasn't young, after all.
Jay stubbornly refused to admit anything, but I still had the evidence needed to corner him. Wasn't your real motive the inheritance? I pulled out several documents from my bag and showed them to him.
What? How did you get those?
You were so focused on running away that you forgot about these, didn't you?
Damn it.
The documents were credit card statements and debt collection notices. When I searched his room, I found them stuffed in the back of a drawer. Jay was deeply in debt. You spent all that money on your mistress, didn't you? The statements were filled with purchases from luxury brands, high-end restaurants, and hotels. I had never been taken to any of those places or received such gifts. Oh, and I have a photo of her too. Here. It was a picture I had secretly taken when I saw him entering the apartment with another woman. Jay crumpled the documents and photo in his hands and threw them to the ground.
Even if I killed her, I wouldn't get the inheritance, so I had no motive.
He looked at me triumphantly. That's why you plan to kill me next, isn't it?
What?
I kept wondering about what Diana said at the funeral. It was a message from my mother through Diana. The victim ends with me. Although the diary didn't mention it, I had found something in my mother's belongings. Her phone, which contained a recorded video. I played it for Jay. At first, the ceiling was all that was visible. Then, I heard his voice, slightly amused.
How are you feeling, Kelly?
My mother replied,
Carla will take me to the hospital soon, so I'll be fine.
The video captured an argument between them.
You've taken enough of those pills. It won't be long now.
His voice was cold and emotionless.
Next, it's Carla's turn.
My mother responded fiercely.
You won't get away with this. If you harm her, I will come for you.
The video ended with Jay leaving in a huff, 2 days before her death. I don't know what she intended to do with it, but perhaps she left the recorded data, considering the possibility that she might not survive.
That old hag.
He glared at me. You can't escape this time.
Damn it. Fine. I did it.
After thinking for a while, my husband grimaced, let out a deep sigh, and began to speak. He said he needed the money to please his mistress.
I tried gambling to increase my money. At first, things went well, and my wallet was always full.
But over time, it seems he started losing more than winning. When he ran out of cash, he borrowed money and turned to the stock market. However, things didn't go as smoothly as he had hoped, and his debt only kept piling up. Why would you go that far? What were you trying to achieve?
She's a popular girl working at a strip club. I thought that if I spent money on her, she'd eventually pay attention to me.
For something like that. He confessed that after years of lavishing her with gifts, he finally managed to have a relationship with her. But maintaining that relationship required more money, leaving him wondering what to do next. Then, my father passed away, and Jay learned that my mother had inherited a large sum of money. With that in mind, he devised a plan to send her to the afterlife. Originally, he intended to find a quicker and simpler way, but he realized that the sudden death of a healthy woman might arouse suspicion. So, he decided to weaken her gradually by using drugs.
I thought I had everything under control. but then Diana said that at the funeral.
He was haunted by my mother's words and decided to fake his death to escape her curse. I'm reporting you to the police. You can't get away with this. I firmly told Jay what I had to say. His face quickly darkened before my eyes.
Please, no!
It's over.
I'll change. Let's honor your mom together, please.
Enough. I'm going to the police now.
Damn it! You got cocky just because I was acting humble.
He lunged at me, but we were in a busy area. Passers-by quickly restrained him and called the police. Jay struggled and shouted, but the police soon arrived and took him away. Afterward, my husband was arrested for the crime of taking my mother's life. The purchase history of the drugs he had given her was uncovered, and the ingredients matched perfectly with the analysis I had obtained. These pieces of evidence, along with the video my mother left behind, became the decisive factors that sealed his fate behind bars. Of course, I divorced him. I also filed for compensation of $20,000 for emotional distress due to the affair, along with $60,000 in child support for our daughter. It may take a while, but I fully intend to collect these payments once he is released. Diana and I moved back to my family home and began a new life.
Thank you, Carla. I'm watching over you. Grandma is smiling.
She said that to me one day after things had finally settled down. Perhaps my mother's soul had found peace at last. I'll do my best to live a good life from now on. I looked up at the sky and made that vow to my parents in heaven. How did you like this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.